Welcome to the first seminar of the year at Brown, though we did begin yesterday at Harvard in a joint Brown-Harvard South Asian Politics seminar series, which has gone on for 13 years. And my co-chair from Harvard is here, Fayyad Ali, and he teaches political science in the government department at Harvard. I'm Ashutosh Varshney, director of the Saxena Center here, and professor at Watson Institute and Political Science. So the topic today for a panel discussion is Indian elections and after. For the sake of precise social science formulations, shall we say, let me read out from what I wrote as introductory remarks. These were presented first in Delhi in July, and with some modification, they're here. For decades, scholars of Indian politics subscribed to the theory that Indian politics had a centrist ideological pivot. Some called it India's persistent centrism, the Rudolphs, and others, like me, called it the self-correcting mechanisms of Indian democracy. What was the basic idea? The basic idea was that India had so many diversities of religion, caste, language, tribe, class, that a right-wing or left-wing capture of power was electorally possible in states, but not at the national level. Left of center or right of center rule was possible at the center, but not right wing or left wing rule. To come to power, coalitions across religion, caste, language, and tribe must be made. Critically, centrism was also supported by a constitutional and institutional structure of courts, election commission, federalism, and laws that checked ideological purity of the left or right. Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister since 2014, fundamentally challenged this theory. Both in 2019 and 24 elections, his reliance on ideological purity, namely Hindu nationalism in his case, became all too evident. Because Hindu nationalism means Hindu majoritarianism, political scientists classify it as a right-wing ideology. Hindu nationalism is not comparatively unique. It compares in varying measures with right-wing ideologies of interwar Europe, white nationalism in the United States, and modern-day anti-immigrant ideologies of continental Europe. In the West, the majority-minority conceptualization generally tends to be racial, generally, not always. In India, given the nation's history, it tends to be religious. Majorities and minorities, at least not at the state level, or not in all states, but at the national level, are conceptualized in religious terms. But the basic claim is roughly similar, that the majority community must be united, and it should define the nation's politics, culture, and even laws. And in different ways, minorities must accept majoritarian primacy. This is true of Jim Crow South, 1880 to 1965 in America. This is true of the ideologies that emerged in much of Europe, in continental Europe between the wars, and true in what has come to be called right-wing populism, or populism of the right, in much of continental Europe in recent times. Additionally, and this is important, sometimes it's lost in the literature, which concentrates on electoral politics. Additionally, concepts of freedom of expression and civil society autonomy are also a problem for such majoritarian concepts, for they weaken, to quote a famous formulation of this, they weaken national resolve and strength by emphasizing individual freedoms, not duties, by resisting governmental directions for national resurrection. The idea the basic idea here is that freedom of expression and rights to free speech, they weaken national strength. And the concept of duties to the nation that leads to national resurrection. What does the verdict of 2024 imply? That's what we are discussing, and its implications as we go forward. Some we have begun to see. Though it formed an alliance-based government, the ruling party fell 32 seats short of the majority mark, 273, lost 272 out of 543, which are contested. 2 more are added later to 272 out of 543 contested. So it got 240. 32 seats short of the majority mark, lost 63 seats relative to the 219 mark, or 219 achievement, and had a shortfall of 130 seats compared to its 2024 target. The target was 370 seats, repeated many, 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 many times. I counted 15 times. I'm sure that was an undercount. Does the verdict mean a rejection of Hindu nationalism, or is it best to view it as an aggregation of state-level factors as opposed to a verdict that is national in tenor? I'm not sure we can fully answer this question today. Perhaps some attempt will be made, and perhaps we can take the discussion there. What role did the welfare benefits play? Modi's Hindu nationalism was supplemented by a vast array of welfare goods: free ration, housing, toilets, cooking gas, water in home taps. Did unemployment and inflation trump welfare benefits? Were concerns about the Constitution an important determinant of popular vote? And why? This has been repeated many times by the opposition, especially by Rahul Gandhi, but also by Akhilesh Yadav, who won the maximum number of seats in UP in a result that surprised most, if not all. Did not surprise Yogendra Yadav, but surprised almost every other commentator. Akhilesh Yadav's party, Samajwadi Party, SP had 37 seats, and BJP got 33 seats. So BJP ceased to be the largest party of UP, which had become, for many, its new home of strength, political strength, and ideological strength, ideological vigor. How did the upper caste, OBCs, Dalits, and Muslim vote? Is there a national generalization possible? I think that this will be discussed at some length today. Finally, what are the implications of the electoral verdict for democracy, governance, rights, citizenship, and now policy going forward? And we hope to cover most of these. We will not be able to cover all of these. All of these questions they've been put before your consideration because they're important. Our speakers and their main themes are as follows. We'll start with Pradeep Chhibber, who will speak, and I'll introduce each of them as they before they make their presentations. But let me give you a snapshot here. Pradeep Chhibber will speak on party politics in 2024 elections through the microcosm of Jaunpur constituency in UP, in eastern UP, through Jaunpur to 2024 elections. A very micro-level, intense analysis. Yamini Aiyar will go next and will speak on welfare benefits and voting. Were welfare promises and benefits of the Modi II government especially trumped by something else, and why? Hilal Ahmed will go next on the Muslim vote. Was there one Muslim vote, or were there several Muslim votes? How do we understand that? And in the end, we'll have Gilles Verniers talking about caste and the 224 vote and after. So we'll begin with Pradeep Chhibber. And here is, I think all of us are using, or perhaps all of us are using a PowerPoint. So I think all of us will sit there, and then when the panel gets into a discussion with the audience and with each other, one another, then we'll come here. So Pradeep Chhibber is the he's in my cohort of South Asianists. He's the most prolific scholar in my cohort. He is professor of political science, an Indo-American Community Chair in India Studies. He has written more books than most of us in the cohort put together. And the most recent are worth noting with Adnan Nasimullah at King's London, Righteous Demagogues, just out recently, Populist Politics and Party System Realignment in South Asia and Beyond. Before that, with Rahul Verma, who is at Center for Policy Research in Delhi, a book entitled Ideology and Identity, The Changing Party Systems of India. And before that, with Sandeep Shastri, a scholar in Bangalore. The book was called Religious Practice and Democracy in India. So he's dealt with ideology, with religion, with caste in an earlier version, and then the idea of populism, how far has it gone in India? It has gone very far in Europe and parts of America and Latin America. So its application to Indian politics. I'll stop there. The list is very long. As I said, he's the most prolific in my cohort in America. So Pradeep, each speaker will speak for 15 to 20 minutes. At 20 is the ultimate cutoff. I will use my powers in a very, very Modi way. We'll just stop you from speaking. We'll take the microphone away at 20 minutes. But 15 to 20 minutes is what you have to present your profound reflections and your wise insights. There won't be full social science arguments in 20 minutes. That's not the purpose of a panel. The purpose of the panel is to present ideas, insights, and reflections. So here we go. Pradeep first on party politics and 2024 elections through the microcosm of Jaunpur, Eastern UP.
Alrighty. Hi, Pawan. Thank you, Ashu, for embarrassing me sufficiently. But before I begin my presentation, I've got to decide, am I going to be my usual self, which is go through some bunch of slides, or should I say 3 provocative things in the beginning? So I think I've decided I'm going to go with the latter just for the heck of it, right? And some of it is because I know Ashu well, and Gilles, and Hiral, and Yamini. I want to tease them a little bit. First, I think the idea, and I'm going to just say 2 things, and I'm going to move on. The idea of who won and who lost this election is a moral question, and I will not say any more than that. It's something for each one of you to look inside yourself and ask what I'm saying. And the second question you need to ask, the second issue, which I think we need to think about is, just a thought, was this a national wave? Was it not a national wave? If BJP had gotten as many seats in UP as it had wanted, what would have happened? And if BJP had not won in Odisha, what would have happened? I'll leave those thoughts to you. So whether this is national or not, just chew over those things, just a thought. Now, what am I going to speak about today? So, I've been a political scientist for a very long time, and I'm kind of getting tired of what I do, so I thought we'd do something different. Yes? You said 3 provocative. Oh, yeah, third one is coming. Oh, see, thank you. The third one is, I think that Rahul is my co-author, is in there, right? So according to Yamini, Rahul always says he has 3 points, so I have to give the speech. And he remembers them. I haven't forgotten the third. The third one, and I'm just going to be deliberately provocative, but just for you to think about, many of your students, there's a lot of conversation in India about religious voting, caste voting, class voting. Pick your category. At the end of the day, if all this is happening, I should see it in a campaign. Yes or no? The campaign should be out there mobilizing people doing this. Fair enough. But what if I was to show you that maybe all of this is happening, maybe a little bit in the campaign. And actually what's happening on the ground isn't reflecting all these mega things we are talking about. And maybe, just maybe, we're just missing the boat. When we look at a campaign, that's not what's happening. Okay, so that's the third provocation, third provocation. And just to, this is just to rile the audience. I put this is an academic audience. Nobody gets riled. I'm not standing at Hyde Park and, you don't have tomatoes in your hands, so I think I'm safe. Okay, though I'm sure this is being live cast and somebody somewhere is going to be, tweeting. I'm not on X or Twitter or Insta or Snap, so it doesn't bother me. Okay, so let's move on. Election campaigns in India has been discovered, and some of this is just happening this morning. So, being the complete nerd that I am, the slides were prepared at 1:05, I think, or something like that. But when you just got the latest ones, I'm really sorry. So essentially, election campaigns in India have multiple elements. There's door-to-door campaigning, there's social media, there's something called Nukkad, which is corner meetings, there's Sammelans, which is gatherings of peoples, and then there's rallies, right, led by leaders, etc. So question is, what is happening with these things? What is happening on the ground with door-to-door campaigning, with social media, with Nukkad, with Sammelans and rallies? And the news is not very pleasant. And let me get to why that is the case. Okay. Oh, you don't have the latest slides. Do you have the newest version? No.
This is the slide you gave me.
I sent you something in like 108. Can you check? Sorry. Because there's an important thing I want to share. This is Rahul's work at, you can take time off, you know what I'm saying.
I didn't get it.
You didn't get it? Okay. Can I connect my laptop or no? No, this is kind of important. Sorry. Can I connect my laptop? Or should I send it to you? Maybe I'll connect my laptop.
Connect Brown guest.
Yeah, here we are.
Maybe you just send it to him. That may be quicker.
It's easy. Sorry. Yeah.
Here is our
Yeah.
IT specialist.
Wait, this should be super easy.
Yep.
Allow? Perfect. And can we just make it full screen?
Yep.
Everything else is the same except this one slide which was sent to me this morning. So, I'm trying to earn my living. Okay. Here we are.
Just 1 minute.
And I think this is important for us to, this is just our conceptualization, and this is because it's for an intellectual conversation, right? Which is, who is in charge of a rally? So rallies are mostly led by the parliamentary constituencies, right? Which happens at the big district level or the parliamentary constituency level. So for example, in Jaunpur, Modi showed up and Akhilesh Yadav showed up, and we actually had people go to the rallies and watch what was happening. In this case, the main actor is the party leader, right? Whoever that is. And what they try and do is enthuse party workers, and they try and create cross-caste and cross-class coalitions for the party. The purpose of the rally is to enthuse lots of people, right? Not only one group. The other kind of activity is a sabha, which is a gathering. This mostly happens either not at the parliamentary constituency level, but each parliamentary constituency in India is composed of assembly constituencies. It happens at the assembly constituency level. It rarely happens at the parliamentary constituency level. Sometimes at the district level. This is mostly led by state or district level leaders, and this is where you mobilize ethnic elites. Most of these sammelans are run by either class groups or ethnic groups. That's it. The third is Chaupal or a road show, right? This is quite common, and this is a really big deal in India. Some of this is just a show of strength. In fact, I sat in this campaign and watched, and the meticulous amount of time is spent on making sure who has the flags and who's walking and how many motorcycles there are going to be and what they're going to do and so on and so forth, so that you have a show of strength. This normally doesn't cover the entire constituency. It's normally very limited. And this is run mostly by the candidate and by state and party leaders. Here, the target constituency is mostly party workers and supporters. Then you have neighborhood meetings and Nukkad Sabhas, which is, small neighborhood meetings. These are mostly held at the polling station level, polling booth level. This is run by local party leaders, and the purpose is to enthuse core voters and attract swing voters. And finally, there's door-to-door campaigns, which happens within a polling station, led by candidates, parties, and workers, and the idea is to mobilize new people to your side. Before, I'm an academic, we don't like mysteries, we don't like mysteries. So let me tell you what the facts on the ground are. There is virtually no door-to-door campaigning regardless of the level of organization. I'll tell you what the findings are, and then I'll go through it. These neighborhood Nukkad meetings are mostly held for small groups of people. They don't reach across cross-caste coalition. They're held for small groups of people just to mobilize your core supporters. The road shows, some did happen in the place we studied, and these were mostly to enthuse your party workers. There was some sabhas happened, mostly to mobilize ethnic elites, and there was one rally each led by by Akhilesh Yadav and Mr. Modi, respectively. And what you realize is that the bottom line is, if you want to hear, that according to this one study we did in this one constituency, party organization and campaigns were virtually, there was no social media presence. The idea we have, and for good reason, that social media is driving India's campaigns, welcome to the real world. I also think, quite frankly, to believe that social media is driving India's political campaigns and getting people to vote one way or the other relies on only one basic fact, which is a little bit uncomfortable to ask, which is who owns a smartphone? But let's not ask that question because that's too uncomfortable. Right? How many people don't own smartphones in India is the question, right? 20%, 30%. Who are the people at the bottom? I know. There are people in this world and people in the US academia especially, and we all love the social media. Not to say the social media doesn't matter, but to assume that it is reaching across the entire country and the social media campaign is driving folks is non-existent. And at least in this case, both the candidates have virtually no social media presence at all.
Jaunpur.
In Jaunpur, of course. And if you, to push it further, the National Election Studies is quite clear. Social media, so most parties don't reach, social media campaigns run by parties and candidates don't reach voters. It's not that there's no other ways of reaching voters, number one. Number two, the poor who do not have access to cell phones do not get any social media message. And that evidence is incontrovertible. From any survey you do, the idea that you're swinging voters by this it doesn't work. Okay, so why did we look at Jaunpur? First, Jaunpur is an electorally competitive seat. The BJP, SP, and the BSP were all in contention. The incumbent MP was recontesting as a BSP nominee. Previously, the winner, the incumbent MP, was associated with the SP and the BSP alliance. It is demographically similar, and we have lots of time to study it. So this is where Jaunpur is located. These are the 5 assembly constituencies in Jaunpur. Don't want to go there. Who are the candidates? The BJP fielded its sitting MP, Shyam Singh Yadav, after cancelling the candidature of Srikala Reddy, who was a former wife of former MP Dhananjay Singh. It is a really funny story. Dhananjay Singh is a goon. Dhananjay Singh was in jail. Dhananjay Singh was released just before the election. They gave his wife the ticket, right, the BSP, and they come out and say, sorry, we don't want to contest for the BSP. So the BSP says, okay, no, sorry, Srikala Reddy, no tickets for you. We'll give it to now our existing MP, Shyam Singh Yadav. The Samajwadi Party nominated somebody called Babu Singh Kushwaha from Banda district, which is 300 kilometers from Jaunpur. He is not a local. And he was contesting in Jaunpur for the first time. He was considered close to the BSP chief, not the SP chief, even though he was running on an SP Congress ticket. And the BJP fielded somebody called Kripa Shankar Singh, a former cabinet minister in the Maharashtra government, again an outsider. Though he was born in Jaunpur, he was never politically active in UP politics. So, both the main players were outsiders in some senses. Here's the turnout. In 2014, 19, and 24, there's a turnout. There's the BJP, there's the SP, and there's the BSP. Anybody who's looking at this data can see one thing quite clearly. Whether we like it or not, it's an uncomfortable fact that at least since 2014 through 2024, just these years, the BJP is a player in Jaunpur. And the only way you can beat the BJP is to follow the old-fashioned, cheap thrills as a political scientist, do Vernierian logic. If the opposing parties come together, BJP loses. If the opposing parties don't come together, BJP has a plurality vote. Right? Pretty straightforward. It's not very complex to understand. So now, whether those alliances are made or not is a different matter, but from this we can't conclude, that something really dramatic has happened. Okay? What did we do? We collected data from 25th of April to 25th of May. We looked at 2 local newspapers. We observed meetings. We did a short survey. We interviewed some people who attended Narendra Modi's rallies. None of the above is a random sample. We also observed 2 polling booths on voting day, and I will not tell you what the guy said to me about voting in India. Okay. What did we find? We found that parties and candidates did not engage in door-to-door campaigning. And by the way, that is true many parts of India. The idea that door-to-door campaigning happens is certainly not true. Despite the BJP's organization, despite the fact that the BJP, if you read all this stuff, has all these, panna prabharis, people who are looking after every page, at the end of the day, what do you need? Let's say, for example, I'm a candidate, and I have booth-level workers. And a booth-level worker has 1,000 people responsible to them, right? Roughly 1,000, 1,100, voters. I need to enthuse the booth-level worker to go house to house to house to house. The booth-level worker has no incentive to do that. I have to enthuse the worker to do that. The BJP actually, we watched them. They gave some money, a little bit of money to help them because parties can give money legally. This is not the candidate spending money. But the booth-level workers were not enthused. At a separate campaign in Maharashtra, which I was allowed to sit in on these meetings, the MP, the candidate was an outsider, but the candidate met with every single booth worker. In this case, the BJP candidate didn't meet anybody. The BJP candidate was sitting, thinking, this election, Modi is winning for me, right? So I don't have to worry about it at all, right? So, by the way, neither did the SP candidate do very much of this. And for those of us who study UP politics, those who study UP politics, say Gilles and Ashu can tell you, or Hilal can tell you a lot more about this than I can. But the Samajwadi Party won 37 seats. For those of you who know some Hindi, Akhilesh Yadav's father, a big leader, could never get 37 seats, right? And they got 37 seats by sheer accident. The party was so disorganized that at the local level in some constituencies, they didn't even file a nomination. Therefore, to turn around post-election and say, Akhilesh Yadav is a wonder kid, let's get serious, right? I don't think that's the case. I actually think in this case, and I'll say this to you, the reason the elections turned out the way they did is because voters led the revolt, not parties. Parties were incapable of doing this. I think that's certainly the case, and we get pretty good evidence for that because I don't think the parties were organized enough to do this. And I'll show you why that's the case, right? First, whom do parties reach? 5 minutes, oh good, then I'll move pretty quickly. I don't have enough time. First, parties are less likely to reach the poorer segment of the workers. Let me not go there. Let me show you things that you may enjoy, right? This is what people love to see, right? And I'll just show you a couple of graphs, and then I'll stop because I have only 5 minutes left. So who participates in rallies and nukkads? Nukkads are these neighborhood meetings, which is the predominant way of mobilizing voters in India, right? So here we look at class on the x-axis. This is from the National Election Studies only for Uttar Pradesh. The same pattern is repeated nationally. You realize as your class goes up, you're more likely to participate in a neighborhood meeting. Neighborhood meetings are meant only for people of certain classes. They are not meant for everybody. Not everybody shows up. And this pattern is consistent across the country. And at least nationally, we get the same, data. You look at rallies and nukkads, basically the poor that's not their gig. They are not taking part in rallies or in nukkad meetings, right? Also, very limited presence of social media. If you look here, these are the, social media activity of the candidates. Right? Their Twitter activity and Kushwaha's Instagram activity are, virtually nothing. So they have very little activity by themselves. Okay? So what do we learn from this? First, that better organization doesn't lead to greater mobilization of voters. The BJP's famed organizational machinery did not yield greater mobilization. And the SP Congress's weak organization yield better mobilization with a very weak organization. Also, the role of social media as a tool for electoral mobilization is vastly exaggerated in India. Both Akhilesh Yadav and Narendra Modi had rallies in Jaunpur. Who attended these rallies, right? And just so that you know, they attend rallies. And why do people go to rallies? To mobilize voters, right? The idea, remember I had said in the beginning, why do you go to a rally? It's the purpose of a national rally is to get people in, right? Get a cross-class coalition. Here's some data you guys will love. So this is for UP. In UP, Modi gave rallies in 29 constituencies, and he generated a very small increase in the number of votes. So where Modi didn't campaign, the BJP mobilized. If you want, I can tell you what mobilization means. 24.75% of the vote, very mobile, where he actually gave a speech. the vote mobilization was only 25%. Nationally, on the other hand, Modi's presence made a difference of almost 2% in vote mobilization, right? In case you care to know, he gave speeches in 159 different constituencies. That's more than Rahul and Priyanka put together plus some. Okay? What happens? Let me not go there. Okay. So, when we look at the UP data, what do we realize? This is just too much information. That Modi is unable to mobilize voters, right? He's not able to bring voters into the body politic. So when you look at all of this, let's go back here. And I'm going to stop pretty quickly. What do we find? That door-to-door campaigns, virtually non-existent, at least in Jaunpur. And we also know for a fact that when you do even have door-to-door campaigns, the poor are not reached through door-to-door campaigns, number one. Number two, neighborhood meeting, Nukkad Sabha at the polling station is mostly a preserve of the well-to-do. The poor are not part of this. There were few and far. There were some in this area, but not that many. They had a few road shows. There were some sabhas definitely with ethnic and class elites, which both parties held. And of course, the party leader showed up, but the party leader was unable, at least in this case, Modi was unable to mobilize, bring new voters in, right? Why was Modi unable to bring new voters in, right? Why was Modi unable to bring new voters? That's the real question. And I think the answer, which is in a separate paper, and I will show you some data just to please everybody, the reason he was unable to do this is essentially that Modi has lost his populist appeal. He is very popular, but he's not populist. What does populism mean? As Ashu will tell you, populism means when you can mobilize the masses against the elite. Can you bring the poor into the ball game as a part of your coalition mobilized against an elite? Modi can't do that because he is the elite himself. And when you look at UP, you will realize that when you ask people who do you prefer as a prime minister, the poor were more likely to prefer Rahul Gandhi compared to the upper classes, and the rich who were more likely to prefer Narendra Modi, right? Very, very clearly, that gap is very, very stark, and you can see that. So, bottom line, in India, at least in Jaunpur, parties and candidates in India, at least in Jaunpur, did not engage any of the elements of the campaign effectively. So therefore, when you say to me caste mattered, religion mattered, whatever mattered, I do not know if they mattered because they were not, the campaign wasn't structured around those things. And if it was structured around those things, the impact was very limited. Mostly parties mobilized their networks of core voters. The mobilization of ordinary voters is left to leaders. And once leaders lose their appeal to mobilize regular voters, the party is in serious trouble. And that's all that happened. Modi is unable, at least, to mobilize voters for the party. And because Modi is unable to mobilize voters for the party is left to use this organization to mobilize people. And those organizations are unable to do this because they're not structured to do it in this way. So the bottom line is, parties and leaders cannot take credit for whatever happened in 2024, right? Voters decided. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Slides will be available to us.
Yeah, slides are good, except one. They're all, you have all of them.
Okay. Well, that tells you what fine-grained political ethnography, for want of a better term, can say about the larger issues. Of course, the question remains, which we should discuss, whether this is a Jaunpur-specific story, which is always the case. I mean, the external validity point remains, whether it's a Jaunpur-specific story or it's generalizable. If it's generalizable, it's a very big claim. If it's not generalizable, even then it's a big claim. But there is a lot of food for thought here, as we always expect from Pradeep. Our next speaker is Yamini Aiyar, who's was the president and chief executive of Center for Policy Research until sometime in March, I think end of March. And Center for Policy Research is known to all South Asianists as a leading public policy research think tank. So many of us have had associations with it, or had associations with it. An institution that used to have 200 odd people on its payroll has probably 25 left now. That is what has happened. She is luckily for us, the visiting senior fellow at the Saxena Center for the year. And right since the beginning at CPR, Center for Policy Research, she was associated with and founded the Accountability Initiative. But of late, what has attracted many of us, including me, most to her work is her reflections on and study of and ideas and insights about welfare politics in India. So I think that's what she's going to speak on. And the key question there is that Modi's truly extensive welfare regime, why did it not generate as many votes, as many seats, as was widely expected, not only by him and his party, but also by most political observers? Yamini, welcome.
Thank you. It's a real privilege to be here. It's my first talk as a visiting senior fellow at the center, so a special occasion for me, and thank you for bringing me here. It's a really wonderful opportunity to think about things apart from compliance, tax, FCRA, and the state of things, what it takes to run independent institutions in India. And some of that is part and parcel of what I'm going to say. I'm not going to make 3 points. In fact, I'm not going to make a point at all. But I did want to raise a bunch of questions. I do agree broadly with what Pradeep says, that the broad conclusion of this election was very much about what voters did, much more so than what political parties did. At some point along the way of this long 2-month, 50 degrees heat election, the opposition parties were able to capture some of the mood of what was on people's minds, and for the first time in more than a decade were able to leverage that effectively. But but the shift and the surprise, what I said, it was the cracking of the mirror, happened entirely on the back of what voters were thinking. And I was lucky enough to spend some time. Ashu was with us too. We had a fabulous few 10 days traveling around Uttar Pradesh and a little bit of Haryana to understand what was on voters' minds. But I also collaborated with my friend and colleague Nilanjan Sirkar and a few other academics to undertake a survey to capture voter perceptions in the course of the election. So what I wanted to present to you was some of what we learned from this survey in terms of what was on voters' minds that help us understand the broader context, and within that context, very specific questions that Ashu had asked me to focus on the role of welfare schemes and what they may or may not have done to influence vote choices during the elections. I do want to emphasize that what was on voters' minds as I looked at as we spoke with voters, as I as a voter experienced myself, and as the survey showed, was really a very, very, it was silent in some ways, but very, very visible. You could feel it in the air, sense of what does democracy mean in times of democratic erosion. For all the claims that VDEM, Freedom Index, none of it is, these are all some grand Western conspiracy. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, that's not the point. The average Indian felt it. And the decisions they took were in that context. And I wanted to start my presentation just by highlighting that. But before that, just to give you some context, we conducted this survey across 19 states and Delhi, representing 94% of the constituencies. We sampled 200 parliamentary constituencies. Sample size was 36,222. We had good predictive performance. We asked about voter choices. We got 37% for BJP and Congress at 21%, so pretty close. We designed the survey tailored specifically for insights on democracy, welfare, and citizenship. We were actively not interested in being able to predict any kind of election outcomes. Perhaps that's why we got it more or less right. So if you actually use a survey for what a survey is meant for, which is to understand what's on people's minds, you may get to the final answer. One of the most important things, I agree with you, by the way, on social media, but my data tells a slightly more complex story. Ashu was there. I don't know if you recall, Ashu, when we were in Ramnagar in Barabanki district, a curious person came and said, who are you? Where have you come from? Why are you here? And so we got chatting. And Dhruv Rathi had been coming out with these social media videos, which were really powerful, really effective, and telling the story of dictatorship, of majoritarianism in ways that were suddenly, the numbers were just going crazy. And this guy kind of summed it up. He says, if Congress wins, it will be because of Dhruv Rathi. This is what we are all watching. A few hours earlier, we had spent some time hanging out in a few villages in a place called Mohanlalganj outside of Lucknow, where we met a local social media influencer. One of the consequences of unemployment is that everybody wants to make a quick buck. And if you have a smartphone, then you want to become a social media influencer. If you try like me, you'll find about 2 people watch your videos, but other people seem to be more successful, including this guy, who basically said, I stay away from everything, but I see and I hear everything. And so we asked, like, where do you see and you hear everything? And he said, what, social media pe dikhta hai, we can see it all. And he and a few others that came to, because they were curious and wanted to know what was going on, were all Ravish fans. So, suddenly it seemed like, in comparison to the same places that we had visited in 2022, when everybody was watching the sort of Hindutva and more Modi or BJP-oriented social media, that there was some diversification. And then we also noticed that there were people that we would talk to when we were pilot testing our surveys who were very obviously BJP supporters. I mean, obviously, some of them were even party workers. And even they were kind of saying, we are seeing a little, on mainstream media, you see Modi, 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 Modi. Something was going on, and then the data tells you 58% of respondents agree that mainstream media only represents the views of the Prime Minister and the BJP. And it is those people, it is because of this overwhelming sense of Modi being everywhere in the mainstream media that there was an attempt to try and look elsewhere. And that's where things like Dhruv Rathi, Ravish Kumar started gaining ground. And yes, it's not for everybody, but it built a narrative environment. What the BJP had with its "we are going to cross 400" in the start of this campaign, towards the end of March, when Kejriwal was also jailed, Congress came out and said our accounts are being frozen, was total and complete narrative control. Wherever you went, you'd hear complaints, but it was they will come back. It just was treated as an inevitability, even in the minds of those who really felt that we needed something else. As the campaign unfolded, new sources of information emerged. Whether there was some kind of strategic funding that went behind this, what was going on, is an interesting question to look at. But it gained in traction because people wanted to find an alternative narrative, and they were recognizing the extent to which legitimacy of traditional sources of information were now being undermined. Lots of talk about EVMs, election processes is not fair, opposition was jumping about. I vote. I hold that exercise extremely as one of the most prized moments as a citizen of this country. I don't like to ask too many questions of it. The reason we asked this question was not to judge whether EVMs are good or bad, but to understand what were the red lines of democracy that people were seeing were being crossed. Because I would often hear when I would talk to the elites of Delhi and the sort of troll ecosystem when they trolled, was always about, these are views, democratic erosion or delegitimization, backsliding, whatever word you want to use. These are all the views of those of you who are sitting in these echo chambers of your own. This is not what the rest of India is experiencing. They don't feel that their vote is being undermined by the EVM, etc., etc. Yeah, so we asked, and it is true that 62% of Indians believe that, of those we surveyed rather, believe that the EVM process is fair, but it is really worrisome to note that 22% said it is not fair. If even 22% respondents felt that way, there was something very, very strong here about the sanctimoniousness of processes that you held as critical to what makes for Indian democracy. We know all Indian voters hold the part of the process of voting as crucial to them, felt that this was not fair. And we also found that there was strong correlation with support for the BJP. For voters, some democratic red lines had been crossed. And we heard this anecdotally. I have never, in all the years of traveling around India and observing and engaging in elections analysis, heard so many people use the word Tanashahi, dictatorship, authority. It would just roll off people's tongues. And this was new. It's never happened before. And it's not like we haven't had moments where state chief ministers have not done things that were extremely worrisome for democracy. Yet this was on voters' minds. And I think in more ways than one, this is what created the context when questions of democracy entered the domain of the narrative of mass politics. Did this shape voter choices eventually? I don't know. I'm not qualified to answer, but we heard it everywhere. And this is, I've just given two quotes from respondents we spoke to in our trip in UP. It wasn't a question that we asked because, to be honest, until we went, we didn't have a good sense of the extent to which these issues were resonating in people's minds. But the question was, so why did the Constitution suddenly come up? Why was there this idea that reservations were going to be, that the Constitution will be amended and reservations will be abolished, something that started becoming an issue on voters' minds? My interpretation of this is that it had to do with the fact that voters were beginning to see that the democratic legitimacy of this, of the way in which the BJP was behaving was being questioned, that they were capable of doing something. So when they floated a rumor, there was some possibility that that rumor would actually become true, and the opposition was very, very effective in being able to capture this and building up the narrative. And of course, it was particularly relevant in UP because constitution and reservation was crucial in UP. There's a red line here that I did want to highlight, though, something that struck me again and again. The Dalit voter, the Yadav voter was talking about constitution and reservations and used the word bhaichara, brotherhood. Bhedbhav. When we went to Muslim areas, they would talk about the constitution, but they would use the word bhaichara. And that sense of bhaichara never entered the domain of conversation about the constitution when we were talking to Hindu Dalit voters. So the constitution was very much part, at least in places where we interacted with people, the constitution was rights, and the link between fundamental rights, reservation, constitution, democracy was very well understood and articulated, as you can see in quotes here, better than any political scientist or any politician for that matter. But this was seen very much in the context of reservations and fundamental rights. And this does not necessarily extend in the minds of the Dalit Hindu voter to the bigger question of secularism and Hindu-Muslim. The Hindu-Muslim question would always come up. And at this point, the Prime Minister had already started making speeches that were quite incendiary. But it was shrugged off as this is election rhetoric. It happens. This is hurtful, said many Muslims that we spoke with. It happens. But the idea of the constitution, equality, reservations, rights, extending to this bigger question was not articulated at any rate. And all of these comments came unprovoked. So I just wanted to put this into context. And it raises, to my mind, a very important question. What are the conditions under which excessive authoritarian tendencies start raising questions in voters' minds? There are many things that are completely acceptable, as I will show you in a moment. And yet there are some things that are simply not. So what are those red lines? What are the conditions under which those red lines become red lines for voters? And why is it that they have become so deeply baked into the DNA of India's democratic process? I think we need to study this and understand understand this better because it will tell us a lot more about what democracy has achieved in the realm of mass politics and what limits democracy has set for itself. Let me now come to the next question, where I think we see some of the limits of democracy in how welfare politics has unfolded. So as Ashu mentioned, anybody who's been looking at India over the last decade will hear repeatedly one of the really the signature aspects of Modi's politics is that he combines cultural right-wing majoritarianism with a welfare orientation, in sharp contrast actually to the Modi who stood for elections in 2014 when he talked about minimum government, maximum governance. And in fact, in his first 2 years, he cut welfare spending from Government of India level, and it was only after the loss in Bihar in 2015 that Modi, the welfarist, kind of emerged, and emerged in full Modi style, with full gusto, with Modi as a centerpiece, with ambitious PR machinery about the scale and technology as the base on which it was all built up. I'm not going to get into a debate on whether this was actually genuinely different to the past. There's a lot to be unpacked there, which we'll do at some later stage. But one of the things that we had begun to notice from the 2019 election onwards is the use of technology had effectively allowed for a very effective centralization of the delivery of welfare, where political attribution from the voter's perspective went directly to the party leader, the Prime Minister, and increasingly, as this became a trick that other political parties were able to jump onto, chief ministers. So we asked in our survey, and this is very different, by the way, and you can see it in the NEAS data, to how voters saw welfare schemes in 2014, where political attribution was split between Prime Minister, Chief Minister for central Government of India schemes. Here you can see overwhelmingly that 51% of the respondents who received welfare benefits felt that it was the Prime Minister who was most responsible for delivering welfare benefits, and there was a strong correlation with support for the BJP, 51%. But this is when it starts becoming fun. In 2019, states had not yet jumped onto this bandwagon. By 2024, all political parties had recognized that technology-enabled direct benefit transfers allow you to say, Jagan has given you this, Modi has given you that, Gehlot has given you something else. You'll see the pictures of all the party leaders everywhere. It raised very important questions about the role of political intermediaries, the role of the MP, the MLA, centralization within political parties, and the federal dynamic, as you will see here, in voter attribution. I've taken a sample of states just to show you how interestingly different it is. Andhra Pradesh, where Jagan was the pioneer of a lot of these cash transfer schemes, you'll see that the Prime Minister doesn't do so well. Jagan does somewhat well. And the others is actually largely TDP, because TDP also in the not so recent past has been at the center of several welfare schemes that states, that citizens, voters have received. And so, this is a nice example of where you have two regional parties in competition with each other, what happens to political attribution of central schemes, of all kinds of schemes at that level. Where you have the double-engine sarkar, look at Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. Overwhelmingly, it's a Prime Minister. We know that one of the big struggles of the BJP now is how to establish its presence of the state chief ministers. The double-engine sarkar makes it much more visible, at least in welfare, for the Prime Minister than the Chief Minister. I want to also show you Kerala, where there's a big other, and that big other is the panchayat. It's where you have strong local governments. People recognize the role of local governments in delivery. West Bengal, where Mamta's schemes have been very, very visible, especially her schemes for women, it's Mamta all the way, and so on. So it's just, the difference is Tamil Nadu, you'll see the Chief Minister is strong. There's a strong others in Tamil Nadu. That's a lot of government officials, because in Tamil Nadu, the panchayats are not as visible, but the government bureaucracy functions very effectively, and their cash transfers, direct benefit transfers, have a long history way before technology. So the interaction is much more wider for the citizenry with other aspects of government. So the point, what technology is doing and the way these attributions are going directly into the prime ministers, the chief ministers, the party leaders, raise really important questions for the degrees of centralization in parties. Can we really have effective democracy when your party systems have become so deeply entrenched in centralization, where the persona and the cult of the party leader is now becoming intertwined with the most critical tasks that a party has to do at a state level, which is deliver welfare schemes? It also means that everyone wants to do cash and no one wants to invest in public systems. So for those of us like me who believe that health and education matter above everything else, well, too bad. Just to also give you last, and I'm going to be done, how does all of this shape voter choices? Well, it's actually really interesting again, so in West Bengal, voters who said prime minister, there were not many, but those who said prime minister voted for the BJP. Voters who said chief minister voted. So many things affect how you vote, but when you are voting for a particular political party, you are also factoring how you see welfare schemes as one of the reasons why you are making your choices. I wanted to show you Odisha because we had a nice 50-50 split there, and that also shows up at state, central, national election. We have to look at the data much more carefully. I think this is going to be a really interesting story, but you see a 50-50 split here. Last point, and I will stop there because this is something I want to dive into really much deeper. Many of us have been arguing that this kind of political attribution also undermines the terms of the social contract, as citizens are increasingly treated by, and sometimes willingly, the government as a beneficiary, a labharthi, a recipient, rather than a rights-bearing citizen for whom there is a moral obligation on the part of the state to deliver basic welfare. And the BJP has been emphasizing the role of duties for citizens a lot in the context of welfare. Amit Shah, Modi have often given speeches where they've said, we've given toilets, we've given cash, we have given you water in your taps. Now it's for the citizen. That is empowerment. Now it is for the citizen to be able to lift themselves out of poverty. So we asked citizens this question: do you think now that you have received XYZ that it is your duty to lift yourself out of poverty? Overwhelmingly, citizens said yes. But what's interesting is that several of those who agreed with that statement are primarily BJP voters. And those who disagreed, you will see some Congress and then a few who can't say. So there is as Ashu mentioned even in his opening remarks, that one of the elements of the majoritarian project is this emphasis on duties over rights. And you can see this is just preliminary. It may not hold up when we dive deep into the data, but it is an interesting touch point to see how the rights and duties framework is getting complex. All of this to say that red lines get crossed, I think, for the voter when entrenched institutions that are seen as critical to the democratic process are visibly being undermined. But then there's a lot of subtle shifts in the social contract in which democracy continues to erode, and it's something that we need to be alive to and theorize better. Thank you.
Let's see if we can get to all of this in by 3:40, so we have 20 minutes. So let's say 17 minutes each? 15. You ready with 50? Are you prepared 15? Our next speaker is Hilal Ahmed. Hilal is currently a fellow visiting CASI, Center for Advanced Study of India at Penn. We've known him for a long time as South Asia scholars. He works on political Islam and Indian democracy, and has been on the faculty of Center for the Study of Developing Societies, CSDS, one of our most important interlocutors for the study of politics in India for decades now. He is an associate professor there, and his books include Muslim Political Discourse in Post-Colonial India, Monuments, Memory, and Contestation. And more recent books are Siyasi Muslims, Political Muslims, A Story of Political Islam in India, and one that appeared a few months ago, A Brief History of the Present, Muslims in New India, just matting it out in July or August. Hilal, welcome. And he'll speak on the Muslim vote.
Thank you very much, Ashubhai, for giving me this opportunity to present my work, which is actually an ongoing work. And I'm also glad that before me, Yamini and Pradeep Bhai spoke, because they have already contextualized what I'm going to say in this brief presentation. What I'm going to do basically to respond to the 5 questions you have asked. We didn't, talk to each other about the questions, your preliminary questions, but somehow I also felt that talking about Muslim political behavior, it is very important to contextualize them in the wider debates on Indian democracy, and this is what I'm going to do here. Because as I said, that I won't take more than 15 minutes, so I will speak. I will read instead of speaking. And I will make 3.3 times.
Is that 27 or 9?
No, more than that. There are 2 dominant explanations of contemporary Muslim voting behavior, especially in relation to the outcome of recent Lok Sabha election. A section of political commentators reiterate an old argument that Muslims always participate in politics to defeat BJP. This argument is not entirely incorrect. The BJP did not deviate from its Modi-centric Hindutva-driven campaign. The party relied heavily on an apparent anti-Muslim rhetoric to reach out to its core voters. The failure of the BJP to secure absolute majority in Lok Sabha in this sense is also seen as an obvious outcome or the failure of this strategy. It is claimed that BJP's attempt to polarize voters on religious ground encouraged Muslims to vote for non-BJP candidates throughout the country. So that's the first explanation which we get to hear. The second explanation is rather speculative. The India Alliance has so far tried to avoid any discussion on overwhelming Muslim support they have received this time. So I'll show you the data, what kind of support they have received. The non-BJP parties, except a few, do not want to publicly acknowledge the fact that their success was almost impossible without the active Muslim support. This kind of political reluctance is justified as a strategic silence. There is an assumption that pro-Muslim gesture of these parties will make the Hindu voters unhappy. We are told that there is a tacit understanding between Muslims and the political opponent of BJP. They understand each other and develop their mutually beneficial strategies accordingly. This is the second explanation. But our NES survey takes us beyond these popular descriptions of Muslim voting. This survey introduces us to complexities of contemporary Muslim politics and its electoral manifestation. For the sake of analysis, 3 basic questions may be raised. First, did Muslim communities, I'm using the word communities, not community. I'm emphasizing this time and again. Did Muslim communities vote more actively this time than Hindu communities? Second, did they vote as a homogeneous community or as a vote bank? And finally, did they vote basically to defeat BJP? Muslim communities, we must remember, have never given up electoral politics in last 10 years. There was an assumption and there was a lot of discussion in popular media that Muslims are actually moving away from politics, but our survey, we did not find it at all. It is true that electoral participation of Hindu communities increased significantly after 2014. I think, let me just show you this data, the turnout data. In 2014, 70% of Hindus said that they voted. While the Muslim turnout remained almost stagnant, 59, and remember in 2009, it was 59%.
This is what year?
Yeah, this is the recent one. This is 2024. In fact, there was a slight increase in Muslim voting in 2019. That was 60%. This pattern, interestingly, has not changed in 2024. Our data shows that 68% Hindu respondent reported that they were able to vote this time, while Muslim turnout was around 62%. It simply means that the Hindu participation in this election is relatively higher than Muslims. This evidence goes against the popular perception that Muslim voting has always been a tactical move. This brings us to our second question. There is a powerful view that Muslims constitute a politically united and religiously homogeneous community. This imagination is factually wrong, at least in electoral sense. Survey findings demonstrate that the Congress emerged as the first choice for Muslim voter at the national level. The party managed to get around 37% Muslim votes. The Congress alliance also did well. It received 26% Muslim vote. It does not mean that other parties, including BJP, did not get any Muslim support. It is found that around 8% Muslim voted for the BJP this time at the all India level. Statistically speaking, BJP has emerged as the third national level choice for Muslim voters. And this is purely statistically. This point, however, should not be exaggerated. The state-level Muslim voting pattern makes things much clearer. One finds two noticeable patterns in this regard. BJP's Muslim vote share increased in the state where the party had a direct contest with one single dominant party. For example, in Gujarat, the Congress, which was the main opposition party, received 70% Muslim vote. The BJP, on the other hand, did quite well in the state as it received 29% Muslim vote. However, there is another pattern of state level. Yeah. So these are the key states, where we collected data. We collected data almost in all states, but this is just to prove the point which I just made. But there is another pattern of state level Muslim voting. In the state where the nature of contest is multi-cornered, the Muslim vote usually gets more fragmented. The West Bengal and UP are two very revealing examples in this regard. TMC emerged as the leading Muslim vote gainer in West Bengal. The party received 73% Muslim vote, while 8% Muslims voted for the Congress. The UP case is quite similar. Samajwadi Party received 77% Muslim vote to become the dominant party in the state. Its partner, the Congress, did well. It received 15% Muslim vote. However, the BJP's performance in UP was quite bad. Only 2% Muslim voted for the party. This example shows that the Muslim voting is a state-level phenomenon which in a way underlines the Muslim electoral heterogeneity in a significant way. This set of data can also be interpreted rather differently. NES previous studies have shown that a significant majority of Muslims do not feel close to the BJP. The BJP's apparent anti-Muslim stand in this election has, no doubt, increased this feeling of alienation. That could also be one of the reasons why Muslim vote share for BJP has marginally dropped this time. Last time it was between 9 to 10%. This time it is 8%. However, it does not mean that defeating the BJP is the only factor that motivates Muslims for voting. CSDS Lokniti pre-poll survey that was conducted just before the election revealed that Muslims identified unemployment, price rise, and lack of development as main issues for voting in this election. Now, why this 8% for BJP? Because most of the time when we present this finding, people would say, no, I haven't seen any Muslim saying that I voted for BJP. Now, this is something which we really need to analyze. The BJP's Muslim vote share requires some explanation. There are two very different aspects of BJP's Muslim policy, at least in electoral sense. First, the party does not deviate from its Hindutva agenda or Hindutva narrative of cultural nationalism. In this framework, Muslims are either projected as a problematic entity or they are almost invisibilized to assert nationalism in overtly Hindu terms. This narrative of cultural nationalism is always evoked to reach out to the core, committed, and loyal Hindu voters. The derogative and anti-Muslim remarks made by a section of senior BJP leaders, including the Prime Minister during this election campaign, is a good example in this regard. Secondly, and almost paradoxically, BJP under the leadership of Modi has presented the slogan Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas as a reference point to reach out to all sections of society, including Muslims. The banning of triple talaq has been shown as a political achievement. Similarly, the party has also made effort to reach out to Pasmanda Muslims to reclaim Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas policy. In fact, an impression has been created that BJP has managed to influence the political choices of Muslim women and Pasmanda group in its favor. That's a dominant view, by the way. This expression of inclusiveness has certainly helped BJP to satisfy a significant section of its core Hindu voters who expect the party to work for social and religious harmony. BJP's electoral strategy for Muslims in 2024 was straightforward. The party, it seems, decided to play down the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas policy. The BJP manifesto did not have any poll promise for religious minorities. Although the Ram Temple issue was not given any prominence in the manifesto, the party campaign became entirely Hindutva-centric. The party leader, including the Prime Minister, did try to create a balance by making positive remarks about Muslim in between the campaign. He said that I have a friend, etc., things like that. Yet the focus of the campaign remained almost one-sided. This highly volatile political context influenced Muslim voting in a significant manner. Only 8% Muslims preferred to vote BJP. It was almost 1 percentage point below the 2029 vote share for the party. The socio-economic profile of these Muslim voters of BJP also a significant factor. It is found that almost 12% of Ashraf Muslims voted for BJP at the national level, out of 8% of total Muslim vote. So out of 8%, 12%, the most were the upper caste Muslims. On the other hand, party received only 5% Muslim OBC vote. This finding goes against the popular view that Muslim OBCs or the Pasmanda communities are more inclined to support BJP. The Ashraf Muslim seems to be more open to embrace BJP. This finding also shows that BJP's attack on OBC reservation has affected the voting behavior of Pasmanda communities. Now, in this, if you look at the rest, that's why, this is actually a self-reporting data. And so many Muslims, they think of themselves neither Ashraf nor OBC. And many of them, they would say that we are Dalits. So the idea that we have Dalit Muslims in the country, it is actually proved here that a significant people of Muslim would say that we are not OBC and we are not Ashraf. So that's why that's why I decided to put that in the table. Okay. The economic background of these 8% Muslim voters of BJP is equally interesting. Our data demonstrates that the party was a popular choice among the poorest and economically marginalized section of Muslim. It received 11% vote from this class of Muslim. The Muslim middle classes did not find BJP attractive in this election. However, around 6% of rich and well-off Muslim voted for the party. Our definition of rich and well-off is very different. If you have a car in India, you have your own house, we'll treat you as a rich. So don't get confused that rich meaning super rich. This economic analysis indicate a clear pattern. The welfare schemes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Yamini, introduced by BJP regime to reach out to the poor and marginalized section of society somehow worked in favor of the party. Though the percentage is, 3 minutes, I'm going to conclude. These Muslims, it seems, behave like, somehow worked in favor of party. Despite being rejected by the majority of Muslim voters, BJP was able to secure the vote of poor Muslims. These Muslims, it seems, behave like other Labharthi or the beneficiaries of welfare schemes. The changing attitude of the rich and elite Muslim also understandable. These groups always remained open to political bargain. This nuanced picture of Muslim electoral behavior in 2024 clearly underlines the fact that Muslim communities do have a tremendous faith in democratic processes. Despite the fact that Muslim identity has been completely demonized in the last few years, the Muslim voters have not moved away from politics. At the same time, they have also disproved the allegation that religious and or communal concerns are the motivational factor for them. In fact, Muslim communities have successfully demonstrated that a positive politics of secularism in electoral arena is still possible. These Muslim responses need to be seen in relation to 3 fundamental aspects of Indian polity: the nature of emerging Indian state, reconfiguration of political narrative, and finally, the political recovery of the social sphere. So these are the 3 things which I think we need to understand at the moment with regard to Muslim vote. Because I don't have much time, so I just briefly read out what these 3 things are. First of all, that the state, which I call charitable state, that introduces welfare policies in the social sphere to assert its legitimacy as a generous entity while overtly expressing its commitment for open market economy, is being challenged rather significantly by the Congress manifesto. And that was the reason why Prime Minister Narendra Modi decided to give more importance to Congress manifesto instead of his own manifesto. So that's one thing, meaning that the idea of welfare is actually being redefined, and somehow it affected Muslim voting patterns. So in discussion, we can go on that. Second is the political narrative has changed. Hindutva has not yet gone, but at the same time, a new narrative of nyaya or justice is evolving. So we are at the cusp of a profound change. On the one hand, Hindutva is surviving. On the other hand, new narrative of justice is evolving. And finally, and this is the final point, that the social sphere after Bharat Jodo Yatra has evolved tremendously. Remember that in last 10 years, grassroots level of mobilization were not happening. Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra did a remarkable job in sensitizing the question which we, for the need for a better word, secular questions at the grassroots, and that contributed significantly. So I stop here. Thank you very much. Right on time, sir.
Yes. I was remarkably proud of stealing 3 minutes in the beginning. That act of stealing will be, I think, hugely insufficient. So we'll add 10 minutes to our appointed time. It's always, and I say this not as with only sense of friendly humor, it's always a challenge to restrict Gilles to 20 minutes. So, and I'll try my best this time. But Gilles Verniers has been a member of our political science community in India for over a decade now, over a decade that I've known him. And he's currently a Carl Lowenstein Fellow and visiting assistant professor of political science at Amherst. This is his third year there. He is also affiliated with us for his Urban India project at the Saxena Center. And and has been a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research. Before that, he was at Ashoka for many years as an assistant professor. And most importantly, the co-director and founder of the Trivedi Center of Political Data. And the data sets they produced for the study of politics won a major award, the APSA award last year, American Political Science Association Award for the best data set produced that year, according to the committee. So welcome Gilles again. He's been here quite a few times, and we welcome him once again. And the issue he'll discuss is caste and elections. Enough.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashu. As a recently minted resident of Western Massachusetts, I split my time between teaching, research, the search for the best organic asparagus, and apple picking. So there's a bag of apples here, which come from the personal orchard of Professor Amrita Basu, a distinguished political scientist, scholar on India, and the Yiddish Book Center, which is another marvel, which can be found at Amherst College, also at Amherst. So please feel free to help yourself to freshly picked apples. So here, otherwise, to talk about caste, which arguably was one of the defining issues of the 2024 campaign. The two contending alliances, NDA in India, offered voters contrasting visions regarding the question of inclusion and social justice. The BJP, on the one hand, focused, as it usually does, on political inclusion and integration of Hindu caste under a common religious and ethnic umbrella. Since 2014, it has promoted the transformation of India's welfare apparatus towards a system that targets individuals rather than specific social groups, while at the same time, in effect, diluting or eroding reservation benefits meant for lower caste and backward classes, notably by introducing new forms of quotas destined for members of the general category. The opposition alliance, on the other hand, sees caste as a key instrument of social justice, promising representation and a welfare regime that recognizes the role that caste plays in the perpetuation of social and economic inequalities. And so it's been mentioned, protecting caste-based reservations, conducting a caste census were two of the main proposals that the opposition made. Rahul Gandhi, Ashu, you mentioned it in particular, was very vocal before, during, and after the campaign, after the election, on the necessity to have a proper enumeration of caste, underlying the state of underrepresentation of lower caste across institutions and various professional domains. And the opposition also conflated these questions into a matter of protecting the constitution. After a few BJP officials had declared that they would use their future two-thirds majority to change the constitution. And so despite these differences, very different types of approaches, both alliances also made the claim that they were truly inclusive and representative of India's caste diversity. And we may remember that about 10 years ago, the BJP rose, since the rise of the BJP, it has made efforts to shed its traditional image of an upper caste, traditional elite party, opening the ranks, including of representation and within its organization, to the representation of lower caste, most particularly non-dominant OBCs. This is a strategy that was successful, particularly in northern India, where we've seen more OBC MPs and MLAs elected, both at the national and at the state level. To the point where some have claimed that the BJP in northern India has even become an OBC party. There is a strong element of exaggeration in this claim, but it's true that the number of BJP representatives coming from outside the upper castes has increased over time. And so the question of caste in the 2024 elections mattered for at least 4 reasons. One, whether one likes it or not, it remains the preferred yardstick to measure political inclusion and the representative character of elected assemblies. Second, since the quota regime creation and the subsequent expansion, caste has also been an essential variable for policy making and redistributive policies. 3, caste continues to matter as a vehicle of political mobilization. It remains relevant to our understanding of electoral behavior, although not in isolation from other factors that drive electoral behavior and not in a straightforward manner either. But in this case, the fear that a third-term BJP with a majority would further erode the quota regime certainly led many Dalit voters, for instance, to support other parties. And we have data, thanks to CSDS, that shows that there has been some erosion of Dalit support for the BJP in 2024. And 4, caste matters because it wasn't simply a fleeting electoral gimmick to be used during the campaign. It's a question that continues to divide India's political space. It's the main element, one of the key elements of division, of separation or distinction between the government and the opposition, and it's likely to remain so. And so campaigning on caste has allowed the opposition to create an alternative narrative that it had been seeking for a very long time and that they can use to mobilize with certain degree of effect. So here I'm going to focus on the first aspect, the representational outcome of the election, and then bring some element of reflections on other aspects where caste mattered in this election. A word about the data first, because this kind of data is often subjected to public controversy. So what I have done here last spring was to collect data on individual candidates, focusing essentially on major party candidates. I was greatly helped by the fact that a very large number of candidates were former or sitting MLAs, and when we already had data collected for state elections for these, the completion the completion ratio is quite satisfactory. We almost got the data for most major party candidates, certainly for the 2 alliances candidates. And these are some of the people who have helped me collecting the data, cross-checking the data. finding new or alternative sources, scrape the data as well, which is not always easy to do from outside India. So the first finding, the first observation is that for the first time since independence, upper caste and OBC representation are at par with one another. Over the past 3 elections, there was a gap of 6-8% of representation between upper caste and OBCs. That gap has closed. And you can see variations are not very spectacular, but can keep in mind that it took more than 70 years for these two lines to actually meet, considering that upper caste represent roughly 20% of the population nationally on a national level, and OBC represent arguably slightly above half of India's population.
What are you using IC for?
IC stands for intermediary caste. So we're talking about dominant agrarian. No. We're talking about dominant agrarian landowning caste who do not usually do not figure on the OBC list.
So Srinivasa's dominant caste would be the same?
It's inspired from that definition, but it includes large landowning agrarian castes, Lingayats, Vokaligas, Reddis, Jats.
They're all
and so the OBCs,
according
you
to
said, are
Srinivasa.
over 50% of India's population in this categorization.
In this categorization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
And so, so the variations are modest, right? There are, 15 fewer upper caste MPs compared to 2019. There are 14 additional, OBC MPs, and those very small variations sort of were enough for these two lines to meet. But symbolically, it does matter that upper caste, for the first time, are not the only and most represented group in the assembly. This is a status that they now share with another category. And so the representation of intermediary caste, so mostly historically landowning agrarian castes, is stable. There are fewer Muslim MPs, slightly more. There are 2 additional Sikh MPs. The representation of Christians is stable. And so overall, there's not much variations in the number.
Can I pause you for one moment?
Mm-hmm.
For clarification of on this table. The ICs then would include not only Ukaligas, Lingayats, Kammas, Reddis, but also Yadavas and Jats? No. Yadavas and Jats will be under IC or no?
Yes.
And Yadavas will be under OBC?
That's correct.
Patels?
Patels would be under intermediary caste.
ICs in Gujarat?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and Marathas?
Well, it depends. Some subcastes of Marathas are part of the on the OBC list. Others are not. The same goes for the Lingayat. So this is something that we take into.
Is it OBC national list or the state list?
No, we use state list. So we use state list to code individual according to their caste within their respective states. Sometimes we do make choices. So I consider Jats intermediary castes across, even though in some states they have an OBC status, in some others they don't. But if you treat it as a sociological category rather than a purely legal one, this is the one way you can organize the information. Right? So very few variations other than these two lines meeting. If you compare alliances nomination strategies, there are marked differences between the two alliances. The NDA nominated more upper caste candidates than the opposition alliance, 31% against 19%. In terms of outcomes, 1 MP out of 3 in the majority, in the NDA is an upper caste, but it's only 12% for India, which is quite a low number. It's not entirely surprising because the India alliance is made up of a number of important regional parties in the south, which, for historical reasons, have always favored OBC representation. But there is also a higher representation of OBCs within the Congress parties. It's a third of their MPs, which is more unusual. The Congress party has always had a bias of representation in favor of traditional elites. As the Congress declined over the decades, that bias actually slightly increased over time in favor of upper caste representation and intermediary caste in Western India, in Southern India, in Central India, and so forth. There was a clear shift and a clear different outcome this time, with a greater, unusual representation of OBCs within the Congress party. So from here, I have 3 points. And the first observation is that the BJP kept to its practice of preferential nomination of upper caste and diversification of non-dominant OBC representation. There's not much. If you break down these categories by jati, and the data that I have is at the jati level, there's hardly any differentiation in terms of composition between the two alliances. The real difference lies with minority representation. The NDA excluded minorities. Less than 2% of their candidates belong to religious minorities. Only 5 Muslims, 1 on a BJP ticket. All of them lost. And they made up roughly 13% of the candidates of the India alliance. So overall, not much difference between the two alliances, except the fact that the opposition made some space for minority representation, while the BJP excluded them almost completely, right? And so, yeah, 3 observations. So there are, so the key difference between the representation pattern of India versus the NDA, or Congress versus the BJP, is that the attempt at increasing OBC representation with the opposition alliance has come in a way at a cost of diluting the traditional upper caste representation that you have with the Congress party. The BJP always tries to pursue these two seemingly contradictory objectives to ensure a preferential representation of upper caste or traditional elites, while at the same time increasing the numbers of OBC representation. It can only do that by increasing the number of seats that it wins. It creates just more opportunities to represent a greater array of groups. But it can also only do that if it excludes minorities, right? And so in a way, the India coalition has tried to juggle in a way with the same balls, but not necessarily dropping minorities altogether. There are important caveats, however. First, these variations are regionally situated rather than distributed across the territory. Most of the changes that I've described took place in the Hindi belt, and within the Hindi belt, it actually happened in UP. If you want to understand where the small difference comes from, it comes from UP. It comes from the fact that the BJP lost, and that among those who lost, a lot of upper caste candidates were part of that. And the SP won with a strategy of giving most of its tickets to non-Yadav OBC candidates. And so what gets interpreted as some sort of a national shift actually is very much regionally situated. Second caveat is that explicitly caste-based strategies come at the cost of women's representation. The overall representation of women has decreased in this election. And the opposition alliance actually did poorly, even more poorly than the BJP did in terms of women candidate nomination. The third caveat is, the same applies for the nomination of Muslim candidates. This actually feeds into your argument, Hilal. We see an overall increase of the Muslim running for election, but fewer and fewer of them actually nominated by major parties, and that is actually inclusive of opposition parties. The third caveat is that while this is relevant for anyone who's interested in political representation, this data is useless to make any kind of deductions about electoral behavior. The fluctuations in representations are contingent to variations in nomination strategies rather than from any kinds of vote shift. The fourth caveat is that, as I said, we should not overblow the significance of this data since there is very little differentiation between opposition candidates and NDA candidates across many, many states. You can isolate a few states where you had a real contrast and where things sort of played out, but in major states like Maharashtra or Andhra Pradesh or Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh, the profile of candidates of both majority and oppositions were undifferentiated. Last caveat is that the inclusive character of the new parliament is mitigated by the fact that political recruitment beyond caste remains very elitist. There is data on assets that shows that candidates are richer and richer election after election. So we may actually question what is the meaning of inclusion and diversity when the pool of recruitment gets narrower and narrower. And just as a conclusion, Dashu, thank you. This is an issue that is very much likely to say because, as I said, caste is at the center of the narrative that the opposition finally found to oppose the BJP. And it's not only a matter of representation and inclusion, but it's a question that becomes intertwined with larger questions that have to do with citizenship, that have to do with redistribution, fairness in public welfare. And it shows. And even though we know very, very little about how people vote and what actually drove them, but the fact that there was a resonance among voters for these questions are definitely there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I invite all of us to be now here. And I've added 10 minutes. You can see why. So we will conclude at 10 after 4, which is when you can join the opening reception outside. 10 after 4, we are finishing. Yeah, I have your permission, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And instead of a Habamasian coffee shop sort of conversation, let's get audiences beyond the coffee shop. This is the coffee shop. So let's have I think we should hear the audience after we've heard ourselves, and we can talk later also among ourselves. So are there questions and comments? And we start with Fayyad Ali, who has been working on Muslim politics in particular, and I might quickly add that his PhD dissertation won 2 APSA awards and 1 Sardar Patel Award from AIS very recently. Fayyad.
Thanks, Ashu. So my question is not going to be about Muslim politics,
okay.
But it is a bit self-interested. I know Halal and I will talk about Muslim politics later, but the yatra briefly came up in commentary, and I guess this is a bit selfishly asked because I'm working on understanding the impact that had. But I guess I'm trying to understand, we haven't spent much time in the panel so far discussing the role and whether there was a role of Congress leadership in trying to take on the BJP and some of the efforts to bring together the India Alliance. And so I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about that and also what that means kind of going forward to future elections about Congress's ability to play a key role as sort of the key opposition.
So the 2 parts, what we can say about the impact of the yatra, of the 2 yatras. Those who don't follow India carefully or minutely, Rahul Gandhi walked from the southernmost tip of India to Kashmir, to up to the northernmost tip, if you will, 4,000 kilometers. Ending on January 26th or 27th of 2022. Three.
Second.
And then another yatra,
January.
another yatra which was not on foot, that was on foot, and 18 kilometers a day roughly, in average 17 kilometers a day was the average of walking. And the other was from the eastern tip to the western tip, ending in Shivaji Park in Mumbai, starting in Manipur. And that was more un-Gandhian and more Advani-like on a car, right? And the other one was more like a salt march, but across the country, right? So, what is the impact of that? And the second is where the Congress can play.
Like the role of the Congress in kind of opposition.
Will it be it's right now leading the opposition alliance? So you're saying can the alliance, it can become much more Congress focused?
Right.
Who would like to take it up? Yeah. Okay, and
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a great question. I think the most important thing that the Yatra did is that it built the political legitimacy and image of Rahul Gandhi, which had taken a severe blow. It just never, actually didn't take a blow, it just never emerged, okay? Everyone was wondering who this is, what he is. He was an ethereal character, would disappear for periods of time, etc., etc. And it also mobilized the party worker towards something. There was for 10, 15 years, actually, predating 2014, after 2009, and in fact, actually going back even further, it wasn't clear what the Congress, apart from the occasional election, where increasingly the alliance partner was the most significant player in many parts of the country, were doing. And so here was a concrete thing that they could do, and a phrase that was given that they could deploy, and that was an extremely important part of building the base. It also allowed the Congress to take narrative control for the first time, and that built its image makers' confidence in what ultimately became a pretty effective narrative controlled campaign, helped of course by the fact that the BJP and the Prime Minister, just lost the narrative and made the Congress the narrative. But that's happened in the past. The Congress just never had the ability to capture it and then take it in, own it and work with it. And this collectively helped in that. But I think it also exposed, and what we don't talk about, and I see the Bharat Jodo Yatra and the continuum into the election as the sort of a coming out party of Rahul Gandhi as a political leader of some significance. But we must also look at what was not done and the messes in the whole thing, because I think there's a very, very important challenge over here. The Congress has never been a party of ideology in the right, and Rahul Gandhi is attempting now to build some. It's still a work in real serious progress, but there's something that's beginning to emerge. As Hilal said, the social justice narrative is emerging. It's, in my opinion, very unclear where it stands on the question of political response to Hindutva. It has a religious response to Hindutva or a social cultural response to Hindutva, but Hindutva, in my reading, is a political project, and it remains unclear to me what its political response to that question and challenge is. For example, if the Congress were to have gained a power in this election, what would it have done on the critical questions of Hindutva, practically, tactically, Article 370, building temples where there supposedly were some in the past, the project of history, Uniform Civil Code? There is no clarity from the Congress, just none. Hindutva is a political project. But what it is trying to build something. It is building it on the back of one individual and his imagination that he is, to some extent, being able to build up within his core set of political leaders that he's engaging with and through his speeches. But it doesn't translate into the organizational structure of the party. It also doesn't translate into the organizational functioning of the party. The ticket distribution, the last-minute actions that the Congress was always famous for were very much visible within the party and its functioning. And so the question is this. if the imagination, and I think the instinct is right, that the way to tackle the current political moment in India is to genuinely build an alternative ideological imagination, it needs a leader, but it also needs the leader to be able to take its organization seriously and translate that ideological project into a grammar that the organization can hold on to. It was done in Bharat Jodo because it was one act. How do you do it in the larger context? That is the challenge. And when it comes to the state elections, so the caste narrative, just tactically speaking, the caste narrative is a good overarching framing. But when you are in UP and you're dealing with Samajwadi Party and Congress on the same turf, how is that going to pan out? When you are in Delhi and you're dealing with AAP on the same turf, how is that going to pan out? I think those are challenges that are hard to, haven't yet been worked out fully. And more importantly, if you don't take the organization and mesmerize them in your ideological project, you're not going to be able to resolve these tensions.
So that there is an ideological reimagination of the Congress project for the context of the time is beginning to take shape, is the point. I think I agree. But then if this approach towards justice is not, first of all, how does it differentiate the Congress party from SP and Aam Aadmi Party? That's an important question. And second, what would be the organizational attributes? Every political scientist asks this question. What does the party do? Whatever the leader is saying, in the case of BJP, the relationship between the organization and the ideology is clearer. But how would Congress reimagine the new project after BJP domination of 10 years and possibly longer? Okay, Hilal has to say something.
Yeah. Just to add to what you and Yamini said. Basically, just to add to these two comments, that Bharat Jodo Yatra was, also part and parcel of something called, like, we use this term civil society, but it's more than civil society. There were basically three types of people there. Urban-based civil society organizations, grassroots-based non-party political formation and movements, and there were some individuals who were basically very active at the bottom level of society in different states. So before the Bharat Jodo Yatra, there was a meeting that took place, and that formed Bharat Jodo Abhiyan. So, the ideological support provided by Bharat Jodo Abhiyan played a very significant role. And, that's why if you ask me that what is the most important political document in last decade is this Congress manifesto. Because this is brilliantly written. Yes. And many issues that were discussed in Yatra compiled in a very beautiful way. And that's the reason why, Modi is an intelligent politician. Because he realized the challenge is coming, and that's why he took it so seriously that he stopped talking about his own manifesto.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think that we have to remember.
Yeah, I think that's clear. Also, it was also clear to most of us who were in the field that certainly after the second round of vote, Mr. Modi started taking on Congress manifesto as opposed to talking about his own manifesto, other than the idea of Muslims as infiltrators, which is right. Other than that idea. But SP Congress is the issue. The issue is this PDA, right? The Pichhada, Dalit, and Alpsankyak. If that is the new coalition that is to be built between OBCs, Dalits, and minorities, then there is no difference between SP, Congress, and to some extent, Aam Aadmi Party also has something else, but this is and yes, this will play out in some way.
I mean, I cannot help but smile at the idea that, the one idea that seems to be key now to the renewal or the revival of the Congress Party is a very, very old idea and formula, which is basically the formula that was used to combat the Congress Party for many decades.
This is Mandal 2.0.
A fundamental tenet of
this is Mandal 2.0. In many ways, this is Mandal 2.0. Other questions? Yes, Suved.
Very short question. If the farmers' protests also had something to do with the revival, because I don't think it came up in any of the
Who would like to answer that?
Just one
Important.
data point. In that survey, the early results that I showed you, 86% of respondents said that they support the farmers' protests.
At the national level?
At the national level, 86%. I think it speaks to some of the bigger picture questions about crony capitalism, the nature of the Indian economy, and what it's doing for that, and it links to the resonance of unemployment and inflation through the election.
But as an idea which, or as a factor determining vote, it could only be in northern states.
Western
not East UP, Western UP, Haryana and Punjab,
in the data
and the Green Revolution belt of Rajasthan.
and it showed up in the data.
It's unlikely to have done anything to Bengal vote.
No.
Yeah. So I think this is where it was farmers' vote. So. Okay, other questions? Yeah.
So I'm wondering what the slogan "Ab ki baar 400 paar" did have a real effect on the voting dynamics in the country.
You show that.
Yeah. So those who didn't follow the campaign minutely, Mr. Modi, right after the assembly election victories in December of 2023, he comes up with very interesting slogans. He's known for that. The slogan that started appearing again and again, "Ab ki baar 400 par." So more than 400 this time, out of 545. Incidentally, 2/3 is 363.6. That's 364. If you have 364, you have 2/3 of parliament, right? Which can allow you to change the constitution, right? You'll need half of states in any case, in addition, for those matters which affect states as well.
Then
not necessarily everything. And half of the states are with BJP. So just a little over half are with the BJP. So 370 it's not only the resonance with Article 370, which is how he put it later, not earlier. But 370 was basically more than 2/3. 364 is not a sexy political slogan. That I want 363.4 or 364. 370 became the weighty political slogan. But it had the ability, it had the potential for changing the constitution. So what our informants say, in fact, this appeared again and again. Maybe Hilal can say something. A lot Yamini said, right, about that, about what the Dalits were saying to us while we were working. Yeah, Hilal.
Yeah, basically, Mr. Modi has got something to do with creating history. He would like to be remembered. And that's why 400 par, why 400 par? Why 400? Because he wanted to beat the record Congress created in 1984. So the idea was that I have already, won assembly election. 400 par, if I get that, then it will be, because, the first thing which he did after winning the election, he said that now, after Pandit Nehru, I am the first one who is actually won 3 consecutive victories in Lok Sabha. So, there are
which was inaccurate, but yeah.
Yeah,
but he did say that, yeah.
So the idea is to create some kind of a history which can be used both in terms of further political mobilization as well as to satisfy the core voter. So this is what I see this.
In fact, are there other questions? I had something which we didn't discuss and I wanted us to discuss. Yeah.
If BJP is losing its ground in the north, will it make it up by gaining it in the south?
So this is a very important question that repeatedly emerged. Let's see what if the BJP is losing ground in the north, especially UP. It lost UP, right? It was not even the largest party this time. It was didn't lose MP, and it had significant dent into its popularity in Rajasthan and in Haryana. So if you think of North as these states, I think you should include Bihar also, though Bihar sometimes is viewed as part of the East. But anyway, the Pakka North, the solid North, is UP, Madhya Pradesh, Haryana, Rajasthan. Right? And of course, you can go below Madhya Pradesh also, so you can go to Chhattisgarh, right? Madhya Pradesh is as solid as Gujarat, right? But other states, and Chhattisgarh also very solid, but other states have had some a negative penetration for BJP, right? So who would like to say whether on the new North-South after 2024, after July 4th, June 4th? Yeah. Chupo.
I believe in what Wittgenstein said, whereof you cannot speak, thereof one must remain silent.
Okay, all right. Okay, so Yamini and Gilles.
Let me just say one thing, and let me answer the question. I think there is this the idea of the South is strange to me, because it's only Tamil Nadu and Kerala we are speaking about. BJP is already present in Karnataka. The BJP is already present in Andhra, right? So, and Telangana, right? So, let's get... So number one. Number two, this is deeply uncomfortable. The BJP has a long-term agenda, and they will fight for every seat. They got double-digit votes in Tamil Nadu, and according to the people I've spoken to in Tamil Nadu, if the AIDMK implodes, we know who the beneficiary is going to be. But this is speculation. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must remain silent.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Speculation, right?
Right.
Speculation is idle.
Okay. So Yamini, Gilles, and then Yamini.
Yeah. No, I mean...
Is there a new North versus South, or is he right that South doesn't make sense?
No,
I think it does. He means to say that North makes sense, South doesn't make sense, but maybe he doesn't mean that either. Okay, go ahead.
No, I know that's what it means. But, I think we need to be wary about these very large regional, constructions. I mean, there are a way of sort of simplifying, complex political landscape, but within the Hindi belt, as it has been shown, there's a variation in result and performance, which are quite tremendous. Even within states, sub-regional variations are also extremely important. Now, to answer your question, well, I mean, you can just do, you take the electoral map into consideration and find that the potential of loss in the north is far greater than the possibility of winning in the south by virtue of the distribution of seats according to demography and so forth. The BJP's performance and dominance in northern India was based on its ability of winning close to 90% of the seats in the Hindi belt. How do you sustain that over time? Is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, and we've seen the cracks in that edifice in this election. And so the BJP cannot find a substitute elsewhere if it continues to, win seats in the north. It has to completely dominate. And it can do that as long as it's Congress versus BJP in one-to-one. It's complicated when regional parties, and especially now that the Congress and regional parties have gone together in most states, at least in the north, except Bihar, the BJP now finally meets some challenge.
Yamini?
I want to add to that. I think there's no question. I agree with what both speakers have said, but there's a bigger political challenge that the BJP now confronts, and it's actually hard place to resolve it, and that's going to affect its ability to deepen its inroads, at least if I take a 10 to 20 year horizon. That is, one, the rich-poor state divide, which is just now at a point where convergence is not going to happen anytime in the near, in a 30 to 50 year horizon, given the scale of divergence. But the economic engines are all coming from so a lot of the economic project of the BJP, of Modi's, which he projects as his big successes, the PLIs, now the GCCs that are coming, it's all happening in growth engines of Tamil Nadu, so you kind of need those. But at the same, the southern, the regional, the opposition political parties, and frankly, even the BJP politicians who are in these states recognize that this is becoming a harder problem to resolve, because there is a lot of political traction now to the question of tax sharing, the redistributive principle that was the core base of the glue of India's fiscal federalism is completely up for grabs now. Just in the last week, really fascinating things have happened. All finance ministers from Punjab, Haryana, from Punjab, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala met in Trivandrum with the Chief Minister and debated their recommendations to the Finance Commission. The Chief Minister of Karnataka has sent out a letter to a whole bunch of states, Chief Ministers saying we need to have a similar conclave at a chief ministerial level. Their fundamental, the tension they're raising is this: we are the growth engines. We are the sources through which the economic project of the BJP actually is getting fulfilled, and yet you're taking away our valuable share of taxes. This is not an easy problem to solve on the back of delimitation, which is going to happen, or at least the threat of it will remain hanging. So there's three, and then of course there's a majoritarian cultural project that doesn't have the same kind of resonance, although parts of the Hindutva project do. So how does the BJP balance these tensions, and how does it satisfy the North, which, as Gilles rightly said, it needs to satisfy in order to keep its hold? This is going to be one of the hardest challenges that the BJP will confront going forward over these next 4 years, and a weakened BJP is going to really struggle with resolving these tensions, and it will determine the longer term.
Can I ask you a follow-on? Why wouldn't any party face those challenges?
Any party would.
So that's all right. That's all.
Yeah, any party would. There's
so to give this very important question a little bit more statistical meat, all of South is only 24% of parliament. UP alone is 60%, 15 point some, 15.3, I think, 15 point, right? So all of South is 24%. If you significantly lose the North, you cannot make it up easily in the South. You see the point? Significantly. Small losses can be made up. Now, also don't forget that there are two big states, one in the East and one in the West, which become absolutely central to the overall numerical game. Bengal is the third largest state of India, and Maharashtra is the second largest state of India now. Bihar is no longer, right? So what happens in Bengal and what happens in Maharashtra contributes heavily to the overall statistical result, right? Second point here, it is not unlikely, it's not certain, it is not unlikely that this southern economic dynamism today will leave Maharashtra and Gujarat behind in the next 10 to 15 years. Not unlikely, I'm saying. Not necessarily. It is quite possible. The dynamism of Tamil Nadu in particular, is worth looking at data for. What's happening there, or global capacity centers, and where has Apple gone? It's gone there. Where might Tesla go? Most probably Tamil Nadu. Where have all the car companies gone? Only Volkswagen has gone to Pune. Every car company is outside Chennai. Right? So these are all serious matters to consider now about what is happening to South-North economic game. North is falling far behind, except Haryana, Gurgaon, and Noida. Falling far, far behind in the economic game. Other questions? Two more questions, two last questions. Patrick Heller. No, we go to you first. We'll go to Patrick later. We'll go to you, Miss. You go to you first. Yeah. Could you just introduce yourself?
I'm Meruka. I'm from India as well, and I'm a freshman.
Okay, great. Welcome.
My question is more about the ECI. So there were a lot of controversy that arose around the activities of ECI this time, which even led to the Trinamool leader calling it extremely biased and compromised. So how true does the panel think that statement is, and what does that even mean for the future of both state and general elections in India?
Yeah, thank you. Patrick?
So thank you. I want to begin with Pradeep. I liked your voters-led revolt. It's not a party. And I want to start from there and make two observations. So one, we were all surprised, right? The polls, I remember the exit polls, we were like, oh, yeah, and then all this happened. And no one.
With the prominent exception of Yogendra Yadav. Okay. You should always add that.
Okay, but Yogendra's not here. So.
Okay.
So why were we surprised? And second, let's put this in comparative perspective, right? Because of all the ethno-nationalist, autocratic regimes in the world, and I'm thinking the U.S., I'm thinking Bolsonaro, Duterte, there's a bunch of them. The best organized is Modi.
Yes.
On the ground, the RSS.
Orban.
Sorry?
Orban being the other one.
But that's small.
Such a small scale.
Yeah,
right.
it's 11 million
No,
people.
but
Yeah.
the degree to which the RSS has penetrated civil society is extraordinary.
Yes.
Trump has nothing like that.
Yes, yes,
Bolsonaro
yes.
doesn't even have a political party.
Yeah.
And yet the voters revolted.
Yes.
More so, I mean, in Brazil, kind of, but, Bolsonaro fell down, right? COVID was a complete disaster. Even capital finance abandoned him. Trump, Trump's still had 36 convictions, and he's still at it, right? And he's right there. The Philippines, continuation of a autocratic regime. Here we've had a major, major rupture.
Yeah.
So what's happened? And I hear social justice, but what are the communicative structures that made it happen? Given, as you say, it's not the parties. If social media didn't play maybe as big a role as we normally think. So where did people get all these ideas to revolt against the machine?
So how do we understand voter revolt? But before that, what is your comment on Election Commission of India and its neutrality, or doubts about its neutrality? Anyone? That should be a simpler one, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, it's a link between the first part of your question and your question, and why were we surprised is because ahead of the campaign, and at the beginning even of the campaign, the BJP seemed to accumulate every advantage, both fair and unfair. And the ECI did play its part into the accumulation of unfair advantages as well. And so, given what we knew about the power of organization and a relative disarray, I mean, we talk about the opposition as this sort of miraculous form of coalescence of political parties. This was the most dysfunctional operation. They took months and months and months to put themselves together. They lost major party members. They lost Mamata Banerjee. They lost Nitish Kumar, who eventually joined the NDA alliance. They didn't have a platform. They didn't have a slogan. They didn't have a manifesto until very late in the process. And so I'm inclined to think that if we want to look for explanation, we have to look elsewhere.
Voter revolt is your explanation.
Elsewhere than organization. And this is where we don't really have a satisfactory response, because one question we've been asking for so long is, how long have people need to be,
Yeah, we're running out of time, yeah. So are you saying why the voter revolt is critical here, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
Because party strength cannot explain this, right? Opposition party strength. So on voter revolt, Pradeep wants to say something, Yamini wants something. Anyway, all of you speak for at least, basically not more than a minute, each. And then that's the end of the
So we can go this way.
Let's start. Gilles, you say something about voter revolt? Yes, you said it.
Yeah, I get the first and last word. I like that.
No, there's the one. Just to end on one open question is all the factors that conducive to the revolt. Unemployment and inflation and the cost of living and all the shocks that the economy has and therefore people have been subjected to at least since the demonetization. Seem to fail to produce have any electoral impact until now. And so therefore the question is, what is it that changed that's made these factors
This is what we asked.
salient?
That's exactly what we asked. Pradeep, yeah.
No, I'm last.
No, you're first.
So I have a short answer. And the short answer is read the forthcoming book Francesca and I have written. And the argument is pretty simple, is that Indian politics, if you believe in caste politics, should be extremely stable, but it's fundamentally very, very volatile. And it is very volatile for two reasons. Parties, people who live farther away and in rural areas who are farther away, and the poor people, generally defined economically, are less likely to be contacted and mobilized by parties, and they swing their votes from election to election. That's all you need to know. That's the argument. And there's very good statistical evidence for it starting from 1960 onwards.
1960 onwards?
No, I mean
67 onwards.
Yeah, but we have polling booth data and survey data. That, in a nutshell, is the argument. And there's a funny part of this is Francesca said she was Norwegian. She's on Norwegian television because she's the expert. She, by the way, has more data than any human being on India. So she's on TV and she said, Pradeep, I shouldn't have listened to the exit polls. I should have listened to our data. I would have been much better off. But she listened to the exit poll, so she also had egg on her face.
Yeah, I mean.
The answer to your first question, observation, Patrick, which resonates with what Gilles said, and to the question on ECI, this was not a fair election. This was neither a free election nor a fair election. That is why it was hard to come up with anything, and the extent to which people's frustration was visible would necessarily translate into an outcome in the electoral booth remained an open question till the bitter end. So I think that's why and the exit polls are good proof of the extent to which this was neither free nor fair. I think the bigger question that you've posed is an important one that we need to understand better. What was the tipping point? It is clear from our survey, at any rate, that there were red lines that the voter was seeing were being crossed by this whole process of excessive authoritarianism. Kejriwal being thrown into jail, my instinct is telling me that was the name has resonance in many parts of the country. Being put into jail 2 weeks before the start of the campaign was a line that was crossed for everybody, and that's when people started talking about Tanashahi, authoritarianism became something that people were speaking to on a regular basis.
How many seats did the BJP win in Delhi?
All, but that doesn't. No, they had done that. No. Pradeep, that is not. Look, yes, they had obviously done their surveys. That's why they threw him into jail. They knew they were going to win Delhi, but they did not recognize. If you are, in my interpretation, it's not a point that is. It's obvious. Of course, they won Delhi. That I don't think that's the point. Your actions in place A may have resonance in B, C, and D, and that's the point I'm making. You threw this man into jail. Others have recognized it's a name that people recognize more than Hemant Soren. It seemed off.
In our Dalit respondents in Chipitola and Agra were talking. They were talking about our BJP voters, BJP-inclined voters in Chipitola were saying, "नहीं वो तो गलत हुआ सर." Arvind Kejriwal ko bhejna, jail bhejna galat hua. Now, whatever happened in Delhi, you're right about that.
No, but anyway, it is very.
We'll have to shut this down. So, last point, Hilal.
Yeah, very briefly.
The last point.
About ECI, I think I don't have to say much about that. But about the surprise element, I think we have to also look at the problem faced by the BJP as a political party. And that has something to do with RSS-BJP relationship. Because there were two very specific problems BJP faced. One, that overexposure to Modi as the only person who can mobilize voters. So they relied heavily on him, and it actually created a lot of pressure on him to reinvent himself time and again, and which he failed this time. One. Second is that BJP, the present BJP, they do not have any sort of a respect for thinking minds. And that's why if you look at the structure of the party, the thinking people are completely sidelined. In fact, RSS actually has to assert itself that we are the people who would actually take care of the ideological front of the party. But there is a big difference between these two. That's why if you just look at the statement made by political leaders, which are elected leaders of BJP, and the statement made by the RSS people, you find a stark difference. RSS people are talking about inclusiveness, etc., in place of Muslims. On the other hand, BJP leaders are so aggressive because they know Modi is going to save them. So I think the problems inside the party are also very important.
So this brings us to the close. We need to thank our panelists for starting us off this year so well. And there is a reception outside, and don't forget that freshly picked apples from Western Massachusetts in this bag are waiting for your pickup. Thank you.
Thank you.